Joining us for our midday devotional. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, located at 7800 Central Avenue, right here in Landover, Maryland. For those of you who tune in outside the Washington, D.C. area, we're simply a bedroom community of Washington, D.C., uh, really right down the street, about 2.5 miles from the Washington, D.C. border, or it might be even less. Today is August 24th. It's a nice sunshiny day here in the D.C. metropolitan area. And today, for a lot of individuals throughout the Metroplex, uh, schools are reopening. Uh, Parents are having to send their children back to school. Children in some jurisdictions are doing virtual learning, which is great. But then there are other jurisdictions that are doing a mixed type learning scenario where they may be in school for 2 or 3 days and then they do virtual learning from home. There are a lot of adults who are basically being told to come back to their work venues, their offices, for one day a week, 2 days a week. And some people are having to go in every day, depending on the profession they're in and depending on the level of how essential their on site services might be. Well, that can lead to a lot of phobia, a lot of fear, a lot of worry within individuals in terms of, especially in this era of COVID-19. It can cause people to have some real fears about the safety of their children, the safety of themselves. Uh, they may contract the virus. Uh, Known or unknown. So this week, the entirety of the week, we're going to focus on phobias. Today, we will simply define phobias. Uh, Tomorrow, we will talk about some of the causes of phobias. On Wednesday, we will talk about the types of phobias. We'll talk about on Thursday the impacts of phobias. And then on Friday, we will specifically look at, well, how do you treat this? And what is the fix for phobias? But I think it's a topic that, if it's not applicable to you personally, I hope it's information during our midday devotional this week that you might be able to share with others that may be going through this struggle with phobias, especially in this era of COVID-19. So let's talk today briefly about how do you define a phobia? Phobias are those generally fright feelings created by objects or events that causes a significant disruption to routine. Those routine functions, those routine functioning abilities, and or it creates an overwhelming internal stress. And again, it doesn't have to be just the COVID-19. It could be a litany of different things, but because we are living in the climate of COVID-19, I want you to make the application of the definition specific to COVID-19. Now, according to the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, phobia is present when an overwhelming amount of anxiety, it has to be, it just floods the system of anxiety and fear presents itself when the proximity of safety begins to diminish between the person and the phobic stimuli. This is how it works. As long as you're in the confine of your home, you probably feel fairly safe because you know that venue, you know it's safe, You know it's free of the virus. You control the exits and you control those who come in, the egresses into it. But what could flood the system with anxiety and fear is something as simple as, let's say, going to the mailbox. Tuesday in my neighborhood is trash day. You have to take out the trash. So now you're touching things and you're coming in contact with things external to the internality of your home. Let's say the doorbell rings and it's FedEx or UPS, or it's a delivery to your home from the Postal Service that requires a signature, and your doorbell rings. The anxiety level will flood the system because who's at my door? Do I need to open the door? Do I need to come in? See, that creates an undue escalation in that anxiety and fear. Let's say you have to go to the store for something. Let's say you have a doctor's appointment. Uh, you may just need to go and put gasoline in your car. Uh, all of these things will actually escalate and overwhelm certain people because of the fear, the phobic response, the fright feelings that something bad is going to happen. And therefore, as long as those type feelings are flooding the emotional system, it's going to really do something to the individual. Uh, and it's not always bad because there's a natural innate tendency in each one of us to protect ourselves from hurt, harm, or danger. So more specifically, phobias are indicated by chronic, readily identifiable objects or situations through direct exposure to the stimuli or to vivid testimony from others about specific situations or objects. Now, as of this morning, the testimony from others said there were over 176,000 deaths in the United States from COVID-19. Over 5 million cases of people in the United States who have contracted COVID-19. Within your own city, that's going to cause the escalation of the phobia. If it's high in your city, if it's high in your state, if it's family members, or if it's people that are known by you, friends of the family, work associates, their family. See, when it's indicated by a readily identifiable object or situations, that's going to escalate it. My own personal family, I've had one of my brother-in-laws, my sister-in-law, and then most recently, about 3 weeks ago, that same brother-in-law, sister-in-law, their oldest son contracted COVID-19. They all survived, thank God. But do you see how that would escalate the anxiety within our family? 3 weeks ago, they buried a young man in my hometown, grew up with him, knew him, he knew me, and he died of COVID-19. Do you see how that would escalate it? Right here, about 2 months, well, not even 2 months ago, maybe 2 months now, we buried a young man who died of COVID-19. When I talk to family in Arkansas, they tell me, well, a person at the church died, a person in the neighborhood died, and they will mention the name and they'll say to me, you remember them, right? I say, yes, I remember them. And that will cause that escalation because those are situations and those are people that are known. And the same is true with you. And depending on how we handle that, it's going to determine our level of how that fear escalates and how that acceleration of fear can almost overtake us and overwhelm us. The phobic response is mostly always too excessive and too unreasonable, which is rarely disputed by older children or older adults. They know this is over the top, but they're saying, I don't care that it's over the top. I'm still concerned about the outcome. And I'm still concerned about how this is going to personally impact me. I don't want to have the results that have been inevitable in others to happen to me. So it becomes an excessive, it becomes an unreasonable response, but to the individual, they say, I don't care. Remember when the COVID-19 first hit the area? I went out and got gloves. And I would go into the stores. I would go purchase gasoline wherever I went, even here at church. When this thing first erupted, I wore gloves. I still wear the mask. But there are people who would say, I don't care about the gloves. I don't care about the mask. I don't care about the facial guards. I'm not going outside of my home, and I'm not coming in contact with any other human being. That's kind of excessive. But it's because of something internal driving the phobia. And for the individual who has that almost over the top phobic response, they don't care what you think. And they don't care how you feel. They don't care what I think. Nor do they care how I feel about how they have decided to respond to the present endangerment. Although their present phobic response is mostly always too excessive, it's too unreasonable. I'm not coming in contact with anybody. I don't want anybody in my proximity. I don't want to be in the proximity of anybody for any reason. And if they are in the proximity of anyone, have you seen people at the stores or wherever, and it look as if they are wearing those contamination suits? Uh, Although it may be laughable, it's their reality. They come home from the grocery store. Now, they haven't touched anybody, but at the door, They take all of their groceries out of the plastic bags. They take all of their own clothing. And as long as they are not seen by the public, they'll strip. And they'll go take a shower. And they'll take those clothes and they'll throw them in the laundry room. Even now. And they've not really been in close body-to-body contact with anyone. Yes, they've gone to the store, but they've not spent any time in that proximity. They've worn, and rightly so, the PPEs, but they've also worn the protective facial shields. They still wear the gloves. They are scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing almost habitually. And they are still dealing with high phobic response. And there is basically nothing that anyone can say. And there's certainly nothing anyone can do to pull them off that cliff of excessive fear. In order for others to say that an individual is suffering from a phobia to an object or a situation, the following criteria must exist. There must be a clear and chronic fear that is excessive and also unreasonable, that has a specific source. In our case, for discussion, we're talking specifically about the COVID-19. But we can also be talking about heights, animals, the fear of flying. But I want you to think about the excessiveness of what people are reading and processing into the COVID-19. And keep in mind, over 176,000 people have died in the United States. That is significant. Secondly, being exposed to the specific stimuli creates an immediate anxiety, such as a panic attack. So every person that one comes in contact with, every person that one sees at a distance of 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, they may turn and come in my direction. It becomes one of those criteria that might be met to say, this is scaring the living daylights out of me. The individual acknowledges that their response is over the top and excessive. I mean, people know when they are overreacting. So when a person says to you, well, I know this might be extreme, but the phobic event is either avoided or engaged with an overly intense distress or anxiety. A person comes into the grocery store dressed in a suit as if they're going into a contamination chamber. They've got on PPEs on their feet. They've got PPEs on their body. In other words, over their clothing, they've got other protective clothing. They may have on something that looks like a rain suit. They may have goggles on. I mean, it's not funny, but have you seen people doing this COVID-19? And when you see them in public, you wonder, so where are they going? Why do they have all of that on? It might be because the phobic event has created such a high level of anxiety inside the person that they have decided, I'm going to do over-the-top things to protect myself. Nothing wrong with it, But many times it is overreaction. The attempt to avoid situations, uh, normal events, normal routines, normal actions that are okay. And to the person who's dealing with a high phobic response, they're not going to risk it under any condition. In church, we can say all we want that we've spread seating, we take temperatures, we require people to wear a mask. If they opt to wear gloves, that's okay. We can say all that we want about all of those things. But people who deal with a high phobic fear, anxiety response, they're just not coming. And that's okay. But we must understand the why. Many times it is because people are attempting to avoid any situation that used to be normal for them, used to be routine. They're trying to maximize their safety. And they do that by minimizing almost to zero their exposure. If the duration exists, if this type phobic escalation exists over a period of 6 months, it can really wreak havoc internally in the psyche of individuals. Now, in the United States, this has been going on since March. This is the end of August. When the COVID-19 pandemic passes, there is going to be an ongoing response to the phobia as if it is still present in terms of the stimuli that is created. What I'm saying is, after the COVID-19 pandemic is gone, then we're going to deal with people who are suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. Because although the coast is clear, it's safe again, it's going to take a period of adjustment and readaptation for individuals to trust their own environment. In the book of 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse number 14, but even if you suffer because of righteousness, you're blessed. Be courageous and undisturbed. But and if you suffer for righteousness' sakes, the King James says, happy are you. And be not afraid of the terror, nor of the trouble. To the children of God, somehow, even as we navigate the COVID-19, it should not be allowed to overwhelm us, to create such a high escalation of phobia, of fear, of fright, of anxiety, that we absolutely cannot function. I want to encourage you to encourage others. Yes, the pandemic is real. Yes, people are dying. Yes, people are contracting it. But it should not be a vehicle through which God's children move into a place of absolute panic. I hope our lesson today has been enlightening, encouraging, uh, in such a way that we can accept the fact that this pandemic is real, but at the same time, understanding God is in control of this world. He's always been in control of this world. And there have been world plagues before our time. Biblically, there have been situations that have happened to God's people. And God's only request of his people has always been, trust me. Trust me. Walk with me. Rest in me. And I will bring you out. Will you pray with me, please? Father, in the midst of this COVID-19, we acknowledge the reality of it. We acknowledge the pain and the suffering that it has caused and that it continues to cause in the lives of the people. But Father, we pray to you that as your children, we do not allow the pandemic to control us. Help us, Father, to take the necessary precautions. But Father, I pray that we will not succumb to being frozen in fear, frozen in worry, frozen in doubt, and frozen away from faith. Strengthen us, and as you strengthen us, I just pray that we will always be willing to strengthen and encourage others through this pandemic. It's through your Son, Jesus, that I pray. Amen. Thank you so much for being in class today. And I want to encourage you throughout this week to stay with us as we study more and more about the impact of phobias and how they can impact our lives in a way that can almost cause us to move away from being the testimony to the world.
Said I'm riding on a new road of salvation. Oh, yes, I am. I'm leaving the old road of destruction. Well, I pull off the side and I ask Jesus to be my guide. Lord, and I'm riding on a new road of salvation. Oh, yes, I am. I'm riding on a new road of salvation. Sure enough, I am. I'm leaving your road of destruction. Lord, I pull off on the side and I ask Jesus to be my guide. Lord, and I'm riding on the new road of salvation. Listen, y'all, since I've been riding this highway, some of my friends don't come around. They used to always smile when they saw me. Now they're always wearing a frown. Though they turn in another direction and try to dissolve our friendly relation, but I am going to stay on. Oh, Lord. Salvation. Oh, yes, I am. I'm riding. Oh, yes, I am. Of salvation. Oh, help me, Lord. I'm leaving the old road of destruction. You know what I did? Oh, I pulled off on the side and I took Jesus just to be my guide. Right now I'm riding on the new road. Let me say another verse right here, y'all. Listen. Since I've been riding this highway, some of my friends don't come around. They used to always smile when they saw me. Now they're always wearing a frown. Though they turn in another direction and try to dissolve my friendly relation, I am gonna stay on. Oh Lord. Oh yes I am. I'm riding on the new road of salvation. That's what I'm doing this evening, and I'm leaving the old road of destruction. Well, and I pull off. I took Jesus to be my guide. Right now I'm riding on the new road of salvation. Oh Lord, said I've been riding this highway for a mighty long time. Sometime the road get rough for me, and sometime I feel like turning around. But I know that the Lord is with me, and in the end He's gonna set me free. So I'm gonna stay on the new road of salvation. Oh yes I am. I'm riding on the new road of salvation. Oh yes I am. I'm leaving the old road of destruction. Well, I pull off on the side. I took Jesus to be my guide. Right now I'm riding on the new road of salvation. I think I run along right here. Ride on the new road. Keep on riding on the new road. Sometimes friends may turn against me, but I'm gonna stay on the new road to glory. Got my ticket, got it in my hand. I'm gonna join this old Christian friend. I'm gonna riding with Jesus. King Jesus, He is the captain, y'all. King Jesus, He is the captain. Keep on riding. Oh, yes, I am. You better come on, ride with me today. Come on and ride with me to glory. Come on and ride with me to glory. Listen, he said I'm riding on the new road of salvation.